Let's get more now on Australia backing the United Nations resolution to recognise the permanent sovereignty of Palestinians to natural resources in the occupied Palestinian territories. Regina Weiss is a barrister and a former ICC prosecution trial lawyer and joins us now from Melbourne. Good morning. Thanks for your company. Can you give us the context to this vote and what's really happening here?
Yeah, good morning, Dan. And yes, thank you. Look, it really has been a landmark day for Australia and, fulfilling our obligations under international law. What happened here is that the second committee approved two draft resolutions, and one was relating to the exploration of natural resources in the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem. Now, what's really important here, Dan, is that the words permanent sovereignty of the Palestinian people in the occupied Palestinian territories was included. Now, it's been decades since those words permanent sovereignty were introduced relating to Palestine, but it's the first time we've seen Australia back anything like this at the UN. So it's a really important day for Australia.
And can you just unpack that for me a little more? Because the use of those words, permanent sovereignty, is just the fact that they are in there significant without a broader United Nations debate about those words specifically?
Look, they're very important, particularly in the climate we see at the moment. You know, there's been a lead up this year, Dan. There really has been a lead up to this. There was a UN General Assembly resolution which called for Israel to withdraw military forces and cease settlement activity. That was in September, and Australia abstained from that vote. And then, of course, earlier this year was that really important decision of the International Court of Justice, which was an advisory opinion where it declared what Israel was doing in Gaza was unlawful, including that settlement regime and the annexation of the use of natural resources. So, and it actually called those actions as segregation and apartheid. So what's important here with the words permanent sovereignty, you know, the state of Palestine has not been recognised as a state at the UN, certainly as a non-member observer of the UN, but not as a state. So this sovereignty, permanent sovereignty, could lead in the future to that, to becoming a member of the UN.
And so in addition to that, what do these two draft resolutions actually mean, and what will be the possible implications of them?
Well, it means that, for one, it shows the international communities supporting Palestine in its current climate to have that permanent sovereignty, particularly in relation to the exploitation of natural resources, and the reparations should be paid. And it's getting a majority. There's only a handful now of states that are abstaining and opposing. And with that pressure of the international community for reparations to be made to Palestine and for that permanent sovereignty to be supported, it really is a step in the right direction for Palestine. And
is there anything binding that will come out of this, or mechanisms that will come into play now?
Look, it's difficult. You know, the UN General Assembly, it's overwhelming. As I said, it really reflects the international community's view on this. But the difficulty we do have, of course, is to become a permanent member of the UN. You need 9 out of 15 of the Security Council to do that, and it can be vetoed by any of the permanent 5 members. And in the current climate, look, I'm not a political commentator, but I can certainly see what's been happening in the US, and we now have someone in the White House who is not for that permanent sovereignty. It may be a long road ahead for Palestine to get there, but certainly the pressure is mounting.
And keeping in mind that about what your point of not being a political commentator, I wonder if you have a reaction at least to the fact that there's been criticism from the federal opposition and some Jewish groups here in Australia.
Look, I mean, there's always going to be criticism, but my background is a war crimes prosecutor, and I can see war crimes have been committed in Gaza at the hands of Israel in Palestine, and that needs to stop. So this occupation is illegal. It's been declared so by the highest court in the world, the International Court of Justice. It's the UN's highest judicial body, and anyone that's a member state to the UN must follow what the UN's highest court says. So whether or not there's differing opinions, this is what international law says.
Yeah, and just on that, the ICJ earlier said, as you point out there, or you touch on, that Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories is against international law. It's also been reported, though, that the court's advisory opinion is not legally binding, although it carries significant political weight and marks the first time the ICJ has delivered a position on the legality of the 57-year occupation. All of that plays into that broader symbolism or really the global conversation, doesn't it?
Oh, you're absolutely right about that, Dan. You know, there's also another very important decision pending, or which will be pending in the years to come, about genocide in Gaza as well. Now, the non-binding nature is international law. You know, you have obligations when you sign up to a treaty, but you know it's up to the state to fulfil those obligations. Now, Australia's a model state, and we should be fulfilling our obligations under international law, and we should be following the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice.
So, Regina, what happens now, or what do you expect to happen next in terms of this global discussion?
Look, it's not going away. It's not going away. And, you know, we've watched in dismay since the 7th of October the impunity around war crimes being committed and the Palestinian people being persecuted, and the territories continuing to be occupied. So it's not going away. It's increasing pressure, and it needs to continue to increase that pressure for change to be made and for a stable environment for those Palestinian people to live in.
And just finally, before I let you go, since the 7th of October, there has been huge discussion and debate about the role of the media and the way that this story is reported and that this conversation is had. Given your experience and the significant roles you've had, I wonder what your perspective is on the way that the media more broadly has handled this.
Look, I have to say I'm not a media commentator at all. I won't comment so much on how the media report things. You know, I keep getting called on, and I've spoken my mind about what I see as a war crimes prosecutor, evidence of war crimes. You know, the media's always been overactive. I worked on a case out of Kenya when I was at the International Criminal Court, and we were very badly reported because the media was run by the government. So, you know, if that happens in some countries, I can see that. But you know, I'm grateful to continue to be able to speak about war crimes and crimes against humanity being committed. As you've let me do.
And we're very grateful that you keep saying yes. Regina Weiss is a barrister and former ICC prosecution trial lawyer. Thanks for your company this morning.
Thanks so much, Dan. You have a good day.